Avoidant never come back unless you do this. You want the truth. I'm going to give it to you straight. If someone pulled away, disappeared, stopped texting, stopped trying, and you're stuck replaying every moment wondering why, let me tell you something, avoidants don't come back because you miss them. They don't come back because you're overthinking. They come back when something changes. And that something is you. Let's get real. You cannot love harder or wait longer to fix someone who runs the second things get real. That's not love. That's self-abandonment dressed up as patience. So what do? You stop chasing, you stop begging, you stop fixing, and you start rebuilding the one thing you've ignored the whole damn time yourself. Because the second you shift your energy inward, the second you stop orbiting around their silence, that's when everything changes. It's not about manipulation. It's not about playing games. It's about flipping the script. When you pull your power back, that avoidant feels the one thing they run from the most. Emotional accountability. They feel the space. They feel your shift. And suddenly you're not the one waiting anymore. But let me be clear, this isn't about getting them back. It's about getting yourself back. The person who trusted your gut. The person who knew their worth. The person who didn't shrink to fit into someone else's comfort zone. So if you want them to come back, don't wait, don't chase. Do this instead. Heal, grow, rise. Because when you become the version of you that doesn't need them, that's when they come back. But by then, you might not want them anymore. When someone with an avoidant attachment style pulls away, the natural instinct, especially for someone who craves connection, is to move toward them. You text more, try harder, overanalyze every interaction, wondering what went wrong and what you can do to make it right. But here's the raw truthing: avoidants don't respond to closeness, pressure, or emotional pursuit the way securely attached people might. In fact, the more you chase, the more you validate their belief that closeness is overwhelming and unsafe. So you end up doing the emotional heavy lifting for both of you while they retreat further into their own silence. You think that if you just express how much you care, they'll soften. If you show more patience, more love, more empathy, maybe they'll feel safe enough to come back. But avoidants aren't wired that way. What actually shifts their behavior isn't your emotional plea or pain, it's your energy. Specifically, the withdrawal of it. When you stop chasing and start detaching. Not in anger, not as a manipulation tactic, from a place of clarity and self-respect, something inside them begins to stir. You see, avoidants are hypersensitive to being controlled or engulfed. Emotional pursuit feels like pressure, even when it comes from a place of love. So when you're constantly trying to get them to open up or come closer, it confirms their deepest fear on that connection equals loss of self. That's why they disappear. But the minute you stop overfunctioning, stop trying to make them feel something they're actively suppressing, the emotional dynamic changes. Not just in your relationship, but in you. Your energy is your leverage. It's what they felt in the beginning when you were confident, self-assured, and emotionally balanced. When you start turning the energy back toward your own life, your goals, your passions, your peace, they feel the shift. Avoidants are not emotionally clueless. They feel deeply, but their instinct is to suppress. When your energy detaches, it creates a void they can't ignore. And unlike your texts or your tears, that silence is something they do respond to. But this isn't about playing games. You can't fake emotional detachment. You have to mean it. That comes from doing the internal work, from looking at why you over-pursued in the first place, from healing the part of you that believes love has to be earned or chased. When you start moving differently, not because you're hoping they notice, but because you notice your own worth, that's when the dynamic transforms. That's when the avoidance starts to feel safe enough to lean in. They don't come back because you made a better argument. They come back when you stop trying to convince them, because your healed energy speaks louder than your words ever could. When someone you care about pulls away, your instinct might be to hold on tighter. You send one more text, replay every conversation, try to find the exact moment things shifted. You think maybe if you're just a little more patient, more available, they'll come back. But in reality, this is often the moment where you begin to abandon yourself. You start making their silence about your worth. You start shrinking, bending, twisting your needs into silence just to keep the connection alive. And that right there is the trap. Confusing self-sacrifice with love. Chasing someone who has emotionally withdrawn isn't noble. It's not a measure of your loyalty or your capacity to love. It's a sign that you're placing their comfort above your emotional safety. Every time you suppress your voice, excuse their absence, or make their inconsistency mean something about you, you're stepping further and further away from your own self-worth. You're teaching yourself that your needs are secondary, that your boundaries are flexible, that your love has to be earned. Usually through pain. It's easy to think, if I don't hold on, I'll lose them. But ask yourself this: what are you really holding on to? Is it the person or the idea of them? Is it the connection, the hope of who you wish they would become? because often not. The version of them that you're holding out for doesn't exist in the present. It's a potential version, an imagined future. And you're sacrificing your emotional well-being in the now for something that might never come to be. That's not connection. That's survival mode. And it's fueled by fear, not love. When you chase, you take on the responsibility for both people. You become the emotional anchor, the peacekeeper, the fixer. But a healthy relationship isn't built on one person doing all the emotional labor. If someone pulls away, it's not your job to convince them to stay. It's not your role to fill the silence with over-explaining or emotional performances. Love isn't proven through suffering. And being available to someone who's unavailable proves your strength. It erodes it. The longer you stay in that pattern, the more you normalize it. You get used to not having your needs met. You tell yourself you're being understanding, when really you're being overlooked. You call it giving them space, when really you're tolerating emotional distance that makes you feel alone, anxious, and unworthy. The problem is, the more you abandon your own emotional needs, the more attractive else's avoidance becomes. It feels familiar, but familiarity isn't safety. It's just repetition. You deserve to be met halfway. You deserve to speak your truth without fear of abandonment. But you only start to receive that when you stop begging for scraps of attention and start treating your own needs like they matter, because they do. And the moment you stop chasing someone who's running, you start choosing yourself. And that's the only chase that ever leads to real peace. There's something powerful that happens when you stop looking outward for validation and start looking inward for healing. That shift, quiet, steady, and deeply personal, starts to change everything. It doesn't look flashy. You're not posting quotes or making dramatic declarations. You're just different. You move differently. You think more clearly. You don't take silence as rejection anymore. You take it as information. And that change, it's magnetic. Healing and growth aren't about proving your worth to anyone. It's about finally recognizing it for yourself. It's about waking up one day and deciding that your peace is more valuable than their mixed signals. You start focusing on your life, not in the way people tell you to as a distraction, but in a genuine, grounded way. You return to the things that make you feel like you. You create boundaries and actually hold them. You take up space again, not hoping they'll notice, but because you're tired of disappearing in your own life. And ironically, this is in that moment when your energy no longer chases, no longer waits, no longer pleads, that avoidance starts to feel something shift. See, people who are emotionally avoidant aren't blind to connection. They crave it just like anyone else, but it scares them. It triggers deep, internal fears of being consumed, controlled, or overwhelmed. So when they feel emotional pursuit, even in the form of love, they pull back. It feels like pressure. But when you begin to heal and center yourself, the pressure dissolves. You're no longer trying to pull them closer. You're not leaning in. You're grounded. And that change creates a space they can actually feel. This isn't about you not. When you're no longer orbiting around their emotional availability, your absence becomes louder than your presence ever was. It's not punishment. It's just truth. It's the emotional distance they created finally being mirrored back to them. This isn't about making them regret leaving. It's not a strategy to get them back. Healing doesn't guarantee reunion. What it does guarantee is that you stop betraying yourself to hold on to people who aren't emotionally ready to show up for you. It puts the focus back where it belongs, on you, on the version of you that doesn't need to be chosen because you've already chosen yourself. And that kind of self-respect is undeniable. People can feel healed energy. It's in your voice, your posture, your calm. It's in your willingness to walk away rather than beg someone to stay. And that kind of energy, it calls in a different response. Sometimes, yes, even from the avoidant who once ran. But the irony is, by the time they come back, you're no longer waiting. You're not frozen in time hoping they changed. You've evolved, you've moved forward, and you've built something they can sense, but may no longer be able to reach. This isn't about you not. Healing and growth don't just change how you feel. They change what you tolerate, what you attract, and what you're willing to accept. And that transformation speaks louder than anything you could ever say. There comes a moment when you get tired, not just emotionally, but soul deep tired, of giving your energy to someone who doesn't know what to do with it. This isn't about you not. When you realize something powerful, your energy is your currency. It's not infinite, it's not cheap, and it should never be handed out to someone who disappears the second things get real. When you reclaim your energy, you're not being cold. You're not playing games. You're protecting your peace. And that's where real power begins. People talk about letting go, like it's this one-time event. But it's not. It's a daily decision to stop giving your time, your thoughts, and your emotional labor to someone who doesn't reciprocate. It's realizing that holding space for someone who isn't showing up isn't compassionate draining. And you don't owe anyone your exhaustion. The power lies in the shift. The moment you stop reaching out, overthinking, or trying to decode someone's silence, you begin to return home to yourself. This is where boundaries come in. Not just the kind you say out loud, but the ones you hold quietly, the kind where you don't answer that late night message, where you don't initiate the conversation just to feel connected, where you don't keep making excuses for why they've pulled away again. These are the boundaries that whisper, I love myself too much to keep proving my worth. And when you do that, when you stop giving away your power just to keep someone around, you start to see things clearly. You start to feel the weight of the emotional imbalance you were carrying. This isn't about you not. You start to recognize all the ways you were trying to earn love that should have been mutual from the start. You realize how much of your energy was being used to hold together something that was already falling apart. This is the part where people start to notice the difference. That avoidant who once felt your emotional presence like a constant pull now senses the shift, not because you're trying to make a statement, but because your silence is rooted in strength. That absence, that calm, that lack of reaction. It's not indifference, it's self-respect. And that's the loudest language you can ever speak. But here's the thing, you can't fake this shift. You can't pull back, hoping they'll chase. You have to actually mean it. This isn't about reverse psychology. It's about truth, about getting honest with yourself about how much energy you've been pouring into a connection that doesn't pour back. When you stop giving them access to you, you create space for clarity, for healing, for real love. And yes, sometimes even for them to realize what they've lost. You don't get stronger by clinging, you get stronger by releasing, by recognizing that real connection doesn't require constant convincing. When you reclaim your energy, you stop running after someone else's potential and start walking fully in your own. That's power. Quiet, unshakable, undeniable power. And once you've felt it, you don't trade it for crumbs ever again. There's a strange irony that happens when you finally stop needing someone to come back. That's usually when they do. But by then, something inside you has shifted so deeply that their return no longer feels like salvation. It feels like a test. Because once you've done the inner work, once you've taken your power back and healed the parts of yourself that once clung to their approval, you begin to see clearly. And what used to feel like love, it now feels like emotional chaos you don't want to return to. It's not that you stopped caring, it's that you stopped depending. You stopped making their inconsistency mean something about your worth. You stopped needing their attention to feel valuable. And that's when everything changes. Because when you no longer need someone, you no longer chase them. You don't beg, you don't prove, you don't perform. You observe, you hold your standards, and you trust yourself more than you trust their apologies. Avoidants often return when they sense that their grip on your emotions has loosened. They come back not always because they've changed, but because your energy no longer centers them. They feel the absence of your effort. They notice that you're no longer checking in, no longer waiting, no longer quietly available in the background. And that absence, that hits differently. It makes them curious. It makes them reflect. It creates discomfort in the space where your validation used to live. But here's the crucial part: the goal was never to get them back. The goal was to get you back. This isn't about you, the version of you who knows what you need and doesn't settle for hearted love. The version of you who honors your boundaries, who listens to your gut instead of overriding it for the sake of potential. Because when you grow, you don't just change how you see them, you change how you see yourself. You stop hoping they'll rise to meet you, and you start asking when you kept lowering yourself in the first place. So when they do come back, and they often do, it's not a moment of victory. It's a moment of clarity. You get to decide whether the version of them that returns matches the version of you that exists now. And often they don't, because you've outgrown the dynamics that once kept you small. You've built a life that doesn't depend on their presence for happiness. And that's a powerful place to be. The truth is, this isn't about you not. The person who couldn't show up for you before often comes back when you no longer need them to. But you won't be waiting by the door anymore. This isn't about you not. You'll be busy living a life that feels full because you created that fullness yourself. And once you know how to fill your own cup, you won't accept love that drains it. You'll recognize the difference between someone returning out of realization and someone returning because they lost access to the version of you who used to abandon yourself for their comfort. Thank you for being here, for listening with an open heart, and for having the courage to face hard truths. Growth is never easy. Letting go of someone you once held tightly is one of the most painful things you'll ever do, but it's also one of the most powerful. You're not crazy. You're not too much. You're just someone with a heart that deserves to be held, not avoided. Remember this: the moment you start choosing yourself, the world starts rearranging to meet you there. Keep healing. Keep rising. You're doing better than you think. With all my belief in you, thank you, and goodbye for now.